Hey guys and ladies and aliens. Um, my phone had to do a update, an install, so it like died right when I was gonna kind of tell you my dream. But so I'm gonna just tell you the dream. So basically, the dream is doesn't even feel like me. It feels like I'm watching like a movie. Usually that's how it feels like I'm watching like a TV screen or something. But there's this man, which I think it's me, and then there's this white dude, and then there's this black girl. But the dude has like glasses on, and he has like curly hair, kind of, and he reminds me of like Austin Power, kind of like dude, kind of like a spy or something. But we're in this like very advanced like room, and it's like a square, but it's like it looks like padding wall, right? And then there's like a like it looks like a window, but it's not a window. It looks like how they show in the movies, like it's just like a holographic projection of something. And it feels like we're underground somewhere. I don't know, but we're basically there, and the dude's across from me. The lady, she's on the right, and in the middle of the floor, like there's like a compartment that comes out, like it comes out of the ground, and then he pulls out like he opens like this shelf or something, and then he gets like a vial. Yeah, it's like a vial like this kind of, and then something, and then he's like telling me like, oh, this is AIDS. We made AIDS. This is a man-made like something like that. But I think because I read this book, and then plus hearing that stuff already, like you know, the mind just like creates all this thing throughout the day or whatever you experience. So usually that's what happens with me. Like it's just like I see something and then I'll have a dream about it. Like, and I'm like, what the heck? Why did I dream about that? So it was something like that, and then he's telling me that, and like then we go to another scene, and then I'm with the girl, and we're outside of the building somewhere we're at, and then we're like running, and then I kind of the dream ends. I don't really know, but I always thought that was like significant, like because he's telling me about the vial, and it was like AIDS and all this stuff. And this was like in 2000, like 10, 11, 12. So it could have been one of those years I had the dream. So I'm gonna try to finish this chapter 3, and I made the other video, and I had to cut it short, but it was this chapter 3 is really long, so it's still long right now. So we're gonna try to finish it right now. The Screecher Memorandum on AIDS. The Screecher, I think that's what it says. Screecher. Here's one last drama. Actually, there are many other perilous situations. I could go on for hours, but I'll give you this last one about AIDS. I suggest you try to find the Screecher memorandum material if you haven't read it or watched the video. Yeah, I didn't ever watch this. The government's, well, okay, this is good. Get off topic, but yeah, you already know they have patents. Oh, I think that's what he's talking about. That guy, some guy on YouTube, somebody, he's all like the patent AIDS or whatever, you know. I'm just having flashbacks. I'm like, did I have the dream before that or after that? It's just all these things, but usually like your higher self will show you ahead of time what's going on in different like ways in the dreams. If you guys believe in the dream world and all this stuff, you know, a lot of people say like it's just a dream, you know, but is it just a dream? Is it? The governments are really trying to suppress it. Dr. Screecher made a video memorandum of what he believed happened around AIDS. He is brilliant. He is a brilliant person. I think that's the video I've seen. He has worked with retroviruses and is an expert on this subject. He showed the video on television, and the government threatened him. They allegedly killed his brother and the senator who was sponsoring it, but they didn't get Screecher. That would have been too obvious, I guess. Dr. Screecher has distributed many of his videos. He got them out to the world through you. Don't hear about it anymore. Oh, he got them out to the world, though you don't hear about it anymore. Excuse me. Dr. Screecher shows on his films how the United Nations was trying to solve an environmental problem. They knew that the biggest environmental problem in the entire world was the human population. Eugenics. And at that rate it was going, the world would double its population by 10, 20, or 10, 2000, these dates by 2010 or 2010. 2010 or 2012. I'm just like blown away because that's why I'm kind of like, because this is when I read this book in 2010. Like all these patterns, the flower of life patterns. Like if you follow, like if you see the patterns, and if you ask for the higher dimensions and whoever you believe in to show you, and they'll guide you through all this. And I'm just like tripping out, like that when I read this book, all these things were gonna be happening. But because of what the Chinese did, allowing only one child per couple, the other strenuous work around the world, they slowed it down. See, and speaking of that, they just allowed China people, the residents, to have more kids because of all these things that have been happening for, depopulation, eugenics. But they believe that it's still going to happen. It is now estimated that somewhere around 2014, the world population will have doubled. If that happens, computer models have shown that all life on Earth will die or wish they were dead, according to the United Nations, because we can barely keep it together with almost 6 billion people. Can you imagine what it would be like with 11 to 12 billion people in the world? There's just no way, at least under the present system. There's always a way. There's better systems, how he says, but they're not going to give it to us. They're not going to give it to us, and they want all this stuff to happen. So if you were in the United Nations and knew this potential disaster was going to take place and had to make a decision, what would you do? I'm not judging the people who did this. Just put yourself in their position of great power. You see that the earth is coming to a solid wall, that it's going to be totally destroyed if something is not changed. So they made a decision, and Dr. Screecher showed the memorandum right on television. The United Nations decided that rather than hit that wall of 11 billion people right then and there, they were going to create a virus or a disease that would kill specifically 3/4 of the people on Earth. In other words, instead of increasing to 11 billion, they wanted to reduce the current population by 3/4. He showed the uh, act population by 3/4. X act act the population by 3/4. He showed the actual UN document that planned to eliminate 3/4 of the world's population. Dr. Screecher showed scientifically exactly how the UN did it. They took a virus from a sheep and a virus from a cow and blended them together in a certain way to make the AIDS virus. But before they ever distributed it, they also made a cure for it. The government have the cure right now. According to Dr. Screecher, the people who were doing this, and history will verify this, were obviously prejudiced because they signaled out two groups, the blacks and the homosexuals. In Haiti, there was an epidemic of hepatitis B moving through the homosexual community, and they all needed to be injected with the hepatitis B vaccine. So UN agents took the AIDS virus, put it in the hepatitis B vaccines, and injected it into everyone. That's how the virus started. According to Dr. Screecher, the other evidence that this is true is that throughout the rest of the world, the virus was not given exclusively to homosexuals. In Africa, where at least 75 million people have AIDS, the ratio of male to female infections is almost exactly 50 to 50. From the beginning until now, only in Haiti and eventually in the United States did it spread almost exclusively through the homosexual population. If you look at the figures for this country, females are now getting AIDS faster than anyone else. Soon, soon nature will balance it out, and you'll see exactly the same thing you see everywhere else around the world, which is that equal numbers of males and females have AIDS. It isn't a gay disease at all. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the prejudice of the people who created it. It's like CRISPR and all that stuff. And that was like my dream when the guy told me. He said this is the AIDS and they created it, and he said it. Yeah, he said it was for the black people. He said it was like some dude to kill the black people. He told me that in the dream. But you know, it's not even like. And I think I had the dream because I read this, and it like showed me in my head. I mean, you know, like a lot of people like have things like that, and it's just like just shows you like the government. And think about like if the world started with two people, there was no like diseases like this, you know, ever. If there wasn't, there wouldn't be population of humans like to what it is now. So you know it's like a engineered virus, and they have plenty of them. And we know this because COVID and all everything that's going down Wuhan. According to Dr. Screecher, the World Health Organization, which has been instrumental in creating these diseases, has also been concerned about other diseases, and so have doctors pretty much everywhere. For instance, let's take cancer. Doctors have been concerned that someday cancer will become contagious, not by pollution or not by pollution or foods or things like that, like this, but that it will become airborne or waterborne, like a cold. You'll just walk by somebody with cancer and you'll get it. But the number of different kinds of cancer viruses is so small that the likelihood of that ever happening is pretty slim. It could happen, but not likely. But for AIDS, there are 9,000 to the fourth power, or 6, it's a big number, 656100000000000. Totally different kinds of AIDS viruses. That's a huge number, and every time someone gets AIDS, a brand new virus is created, one that has never been seen before ever. This means that it's inevitable, mathematically speaking. It's just a matter of time that AIDS will spread rapidly, just like a cold, throughout the world. See, but all this stuff, and how you said they have the cure, and we found the cure, da da da, AIDS, and now it's like no one really talks about it, you know? Because they did their thing, they killed a bunch of people. Now they did the COVID, and they're gonna hit us with something else, and um, then it could be like nuclear war, that thing, and then kill a lot of people. And I think they're all just working together. And if they're so smart, they probably are, and everything's just a big show. And the reptilians could be in control of the whole thing. That they want all this war, you know, so they can inhabit it more, come out. That they say that they're like everywhere. They camouflage, infiltrated like different organizations, and you never know all these things. It's just one big crazy story. There is a story going around that the World Health Organization believes that this rapidly spreading form of AIDS may have already begun around 1990 or 1991. The WHO checked an African tribe of the WHO checked an African tribe of 1,400 members, including everyone from little babies to old people who obviously had all different kinds of sexual practices. Little babies aren't into sexual things, and they found that every single member, without exception, had AIDS. That's when the WHO announced secretly that the virus was. Yeah, that sounds like that's cold, and you already know because you already know. Like I'm acting like you guys already know, huh? But what the government did with the blacks in America, with the people that give them that thing, they infected all them people down south, and it was it was that sexual one. It was a freaking. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It was chlamydia. What is it? Chlamydia? I don't know, but if you guys read this story or heard about it, but they infected everybody in there, and the doctors would go in there and like inject them with the stuff, act like they cared for them, and all this stuff, and that's what they do. That's what they've been doing, and they do it, and they're probably still doing it to this day. And be like, oh, it was an accident. We just injected everybody with freaking the zombie apocalypse 3 virus and megahertz. Okay, probably not airborne or waterborne. It might actually spread like wildfire, like a common cold. There would be a few years lag, as with any other new disease. If this were to happen, would you know that you were safe? You need to know the truth. You are more than you know. You are more than you know. Yeah, I think they can manufacture anything. Like, this is written a long time ago, so they have advanced their CRISPR technology. They can target anything, anyone, or any thing in our bodies, and or any race. Like, It's incredible what the things they can do. And CRISPR's been editing a lot of stuff right now, and they just been they I didn't really read the article, but I read that them now they are working with some patients and with forgot which kind of illness they have, but they're just correcting them. So CRISPR is going to play a big part. The CRISPR technologies, and every country is going to be able to access all these different techniques and whatnot, and they'll be able to uh, use to their transgression for the country and for their handicapped people or whatnot. So, there's going to be a bunch of issues. People are not going to get the service they need. There's going to be all kinds of like hurdles, and right now it's good. So the people that do get in it now. Get your family help, and reach out to these organizations, write letters, emails, see if you can become patients. And there's also another company called Tory Gym for like teeth. They're regrowing teeth, and it's in Japan. And reach out to those type of companies too. For that's like the future. That's like 20-30 years from now. Everyone's regrowing their teeth, limbs, organs, eyes, everything you can think of. The possibilities are endless, but it's going to come with a bunch of back and forth. People, is it ethical? The transhumanism, all these different things, different rights. But let's read this side note real quick. Update. On the positive side, doctors at UCLA began about 5 years ago examining a young boy who had been born with AIDS. He had been checked at birth at 6 months, and again at 1 year. He still had AIDS. He wasn't checked again until he was about 5. When they checked him this time, all traces of the AIDS virus were gone. It was as though he had never contacted AIDS. They didn't know how the system became immune. All they knew was that it did. They checked everything they could think of, including his DNA. It was where they found a change. This young boy did not have human DNA. What? We have 64 codons in our DNA, but in normal humans, only 20 of these codons are turned on. The rest are inert or not working, except for 3, which are the stop and the start programs. This young boy had 24 codons turned on. He had found a way to mutate that made him immune to AIDS. In fact, when they were testing him, they found that he was immune to everything. They found that his immune system was 3,000 times stronger than a normal human's. They found another child with the same situation coming out of AIDS and turning on the same 24 codons. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. See, and they don't say like, is he African American? Is like they're keeping it very quiet. I mean, unless the article said who, I'm sure they didn't give his name, but and this is right here in California. This is like in the 90s. Interesting. So they probably use that kid's DNA to create all kinds of immune things for like. And where is it at? Where's all the stuff? They have it all. Interesting. This is very interesting. So the human body has a will to survive, like everything in nature. Even see, That shows you that whatever they create, the body can create a mechanism to fight it. Like, there's always a way. Even the new generation, the kids being born, they'll create something. It's hard because it's in the DNA of the parent that's creating this child with other people. All the stuff that, they take in, I think, and then the environment, like, changes the body of the person, the kid, the mind, like, everything. Like, people are, like, changing, like, they're vibrating at higher levels and activating all these codons, and they're saying too, like, meditating extends your telomeres, and that's like, telomeres have to do a lot with our DNA and stuff. I think, well, the telomeres are the DNA, but having them extended, like, creates more energy in our body, like, it heals you faster and all these different things. But let's get back to all this stuff. A perspective on earthly problems. If we were not multidimensional beings, if we were only physical bodies connected to the earth and had nowhere to go, we would be in a very serious situation. But because who we are, what is about to happen on earth could become a vehicle for our enormous growth. Remember, life is a school. Maya is Maya. But still, if we realize the incredibly dangerous situation we're in, we might awaken to who we are. The only reason I'm even saying these words or not keeping it secret is because we're like a group of people in a sinking boat. It's got a big hole in it and the water's pouring in. It's not time to sit there and play games and do business as usual and think along the normal ways of thinking. If you didn't know the truth about our environment, you might just go along with your life and not act. True. I'm not suggesting to act environmentally, though that is not wrong. What I'm much more concerned with is an internal form of acting, a meditation that consciously reconnects you to all life everywhere. It is what the Taoists say the way to do is to be. There's nothing wrong with acting externally, but there's another kind of acting that's required here. I believe it requires a state of mind where we realize the situation, we began to take it seriously and work in a way where we can make some real changes in our consciousness. This inner thing we need to focus on and understand will slowly unfold as we continue. However, understand the other side of this coin of life. We realize that these environmental issues are not a real problem when higher consciousness enters into the 3D world. Though from a 3D point of view, it does not it does look like the end of life. From a 3D view, it does look like the end of life. Because our lower perspective thinking, I'm like, it's getting like this, it's getting intense. The history of the world. We're going to open a new subject, the history of the world and how it relates to the present. Each one of these pieces of the puzzle widens the view. The situation in which we find ourselves in this world didn't develop at random. Events occurred that we need to remember. Many of us were here in past lives and we have these memories within us, but that's besides the point. We need to know exactly what occurred in order to understand how it developed into this situation today. This history, of course, will not be found in history books because history books of human civilization go back only 6,000 years, and we need to go back about 450,000 years to begin this. To begin, that's like almost half a million years. I mean, half a million. This information was first given to me by Thoth, or Thoth, Stoff. I always get it wrong. I'm so bad. I should know his name by now. Hermes. I'll just call him Hermes. But I'm just like very blown away. So I'm glad I'm reading this right now. In 1985, then after Thoth left in 1991, I became aware of Zechariah Sitchin, read his works, and found out that Sitchin and Thoth information were almost perfect. So perfect it just couldn't be a coincidence. It was amazing how close they were. Many things that Thoth had mentioned. It's not Thoth, it's Thoth. I think it's Thoth. Thoth had mentioned, such as giants and Atlantis, which he didn't explain further, were explained in Sitchin's books. I read a few of Sitchin's books too, The Fifth Planet, The Mystical Past, and I think that was it. And many things that Sitchin appears to have overlooked were deeply explained by Thoth. Okay, I keep forgetting. So the combination of these two sources giving a very interesting viewpoint. You don't have to accept this viewpoint. You can't just listen to it like a legend. Think about it and see if it's workable for you. If something doesn't feel true to you, then of course don't accept it. But I believe this is as close as I can get to the truth and offer it to you. Remember, I had to translate the geometrical and hieroglyphic images of Thoth into English. Something is bound to get lost, but I do feel it is close enough to trigger your memories. Remember? Yeah, that's what, I'm remembering right now. I'm remembering. First, you must realize something about written history. Somebody has to hold the pen and write it down. So written history is always the viewpoint of the person or people who wrote it. Written history began only in the last 6,000 years, but would that history be the same if it had been written by different people? Consider that in most cases it was the winners of the wars who wrote the history books. Whoever won a war said, "This is what happened." The loser didn't get to put in their 2 cents. Look at any of the major wars, especially World War II, which was a very emotional war. If Hitler had won World War II, our history books would be completely different. We'd be examining a totally different set of facts. We would be the bad guys, and they would have shown good reason for doing in the Jews, etc. But we won, so we wrote it from our perspective. Well, everything's like that all the way through history. Nobody ever talks about this subject, yet it's obvious. Even Thoth, who was very aware of this, he said, "I'm giving you my viewpoint. I have watched the centuries go by, but I'm only one person. This is what I believe is true. You must realize that people a whole different of history, viewpoints on history. So even he was not saying this is it, take it or leave it. So what the observation? So with that observation, we'll proceed. Yeah. Well, Stitchin, they said he got a lot of things wrong. Um, but he put on everybody to the Anunnaki, you know, like he's the one, when I read, like, because I read this book around the same time I read Stitch in 2010. That's where I first ever found out about Stitching when I read it, and I was just blown away too because I was like, "What, reptilians?" And I was like, "Oh shoot!" I was like, "I want to know more about these things." And then I would ask, you know, my higher power, God, like to show me, and it was like books or different things I was coming across, and like programs, and I was like take it like for a grain of salt or whatever, and I was just like, okay, all right. I don't doubt, like, you know, like if we know mythology, Greek mythology, they talk about like all kinds of stuff, and is it real? Like, who knows? But it seems like it could be real. Could be real. I'm going to, okay, Stitching and Samaria. I'm going to begin first with Zechariah, Stitching work. Stitchin's work. If you haven't read his books yet, you have a great treat in store. If you want to read about this firsthand, his primary book is called The 12 Planet. That's the one I read. You know, I can't remember like everything I read, but I read that book. You know, I read it. I read it. No, I did. Though I recommend two others, The Lost Realms. I think that's the other one I read, The Lost Realms and Genesis Revisited in that order. I want to say that's the other one I read. I read The Mystical Past. He writes about many cities that were described in the Christian Bible, such as Babylon, Akkad, and Erech, which for a long time people thought were myths because nobody could prove their existence. There wasn't even the slightest sign that they existed. They finally found one city, which led to another, which led to another, which led to another. They eventually found all the cities mentioned in the Bible. Maybe because he was thinking about it and he really did the research and he brought it, you know, boom, he manifested it, like, because he's like, was finding out the knowledge, like, he was putting it all together. And no one really questioned all these things back then. And why is it like such a big topic now that everyone is like reading the same thing, you know? Because when I read like that about the book of Enoch, and I was like, what? Like Genesis, all these, I was just like, what the heck? Like, what's all these things? And then like, it's like an explosion, and I think it's like the consciousness, how we're all connected. We're like, everyone's reading the same thing or watching the same thing or like feeling the same thing, and then the energy is just building up the snowball of knowledge, and then it's just like bursts out, boom, and then it's like people are having dreams, people are having visions, people like are creating, or you know, people are being shown, people are being taken, and then people are not taking these people like they're crazy, you know, like David Icke talking about reptilians. And when I was a kid too, I seen them, and I didn't even like realize like all these people I was watching, like, and all these things, because when I was a kid I was like, I just watch all these movies, so I seen all these things, so I was always open to like, oh, and it like I just thought everything was real, you know, when you're a kid and you're watching all these movies, like, oh, aliens are real, like witches, like warlocks, like everything was like real to me, you know. So I think that's what I always believed, like everything, because I always had like imagination, like, oh, I believe it, like, you know, they're talking about it. There's so much like things about it, like, who knows why they keep talking about all this stuff. Okay, I digress. But I'm just talking to myself, basically right now. Me and my thoughts. Thinking out loud. I feel like I'm feeling, because no one's around. Like, I'm sure someone's probably hearing me, but I don't feel that awkward, I guess, in my mind. Just talking to myself. And who doesn't talk to themselves? Okay, where did I leave? Okay, the Lost Realms in Genesis revisited in that order. He writes about many cities that were described in the Christian Bible, such as Babylon, Akkad, and Erech, which were a long time people thought they were missed because nobody could prove their existence. There wasn't even the slightest sign that they existed. Then they finally found. Okay, I skipped there. Sorry, guys. Realize that all these ancient cities have been discovered in the last 120 years or so. Most of them, or more or less recently, as they've dug down into. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of digging. Oh, I didn't even finish the other AIDS thing right here, the sidebar. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna read it real quick. Sorry, guys. Becoming immune to AIDS and other diseases, they found 110,000. UCLA now believes that 1% of the world has made this change. They now believe that 55 million children and adults are no longer human by DNA definition. There are so many people doing this now that science believes that a new human race is being born at this time, and that it seems to have come out of AIDS. It is most, almost impossible for these people to become sick. It is also interesting that in November 1998, it was announced that in 1997, AIDS dropped off by 47%, which is the biggest drop in history for any major disease. Could this be one of the reasons? Further, in Cracking the Bible Code by Jeffrey Santee over, when they ran the word AIDS into the code, they found usual associated words. They saw the words in the blood, death, annihilation, in the forms of a virus, the immunity, the HIV destroyed, and many more. However, there were certain other words that did not make sense to those researchers, but that only now can be understood in the light of the previous information. They found the words, the end to all diseases. This is perhaps the single most important event in the world today. See, humans, just, that's the new humans. It's the new race, the coming race. And it's already here. And they already know, like, there's the babies that got engineered in China, that scientists, dude, like, that's taking place. Like, it's here. It's like these superhumans are here, and they already know, because they already know. You know, I know. You know, is it just in the air? Like, you know, China, like, when COVID was going down, I think 2020, they announced the super soldier program. US didn't really say nothing. I didn't really hear nothing, but I'm sure, you know, they have all their stuff going down right now too. So here we go. The layers of these ancient cities, they pulled out thousands of cylindrical clay tablets upon which the history of Sumer and the history of the earth is recorded in great detail, going back hundreds of thousands of years. Their written language is called cuneiform. What I'll be telling you is not just Stitchin's interpretation. Many other scholars now know how to read cuneiform, and as they translate these works, it's changing our whole viewpoint of the world. of what we think is true, just as John Anthony West's work with the Sphinx is also influencing modern thinking about human history. If you don't know what a cuneiform is, it's like little tablets, little clay tablets. They heat up and make them super strong and durable. And they would write like, like put like grains and fish and like symbols, kind of like, those like saying like, that's a fish, that's a tree, the tree, tree. Okay. We'll come back around full circle later to explain how the Sumerians received their information. The Sumerian records are the oldest written records on the planet, 5,800 years old, but they describe things that happened billions of years ago, and in great detail things that happened after 450,000 years ago. Whether you're using scientific knowledge or thoughts, our race is about 200,000 years old. Sitchin says that we're older than that, maybe 300,000 years old, but the records and Thoth do not say that, and neither do the Melchizdeks. This is the guy. This is that. I think that was a priest like 1,000 years ago. We've been here slightly more than 200,000 years, but there were civilizations on Earth long before this cycle and long before the Nephilim. They were far more advanced than the Nephilim or anything we've seen since. They left without a trace. By the end of this book, you'll understand why there was nothing left when they departed. This is the planet's past. It's part of who we are in a way. We have access to all that information. There's a component within each of us that has all this information recorded. It's easily accessible, but most of us are just not aware of it. It's in our head. It's in our mind. Like we can connect. And it's Acacia Records too. And history just records itself automatically. It just records somehow, and then because God just scrolls through everything, and he's like, and yeah, and I think like the Earth is like, humans are like hundreds of millions of years old. It's the beginning of the dinosaurs. That's millions, billions. And the Atlanteans, it goes to that, and the dreams and everything. Because they show us like our past lives. If you believe in past lives, right? Share a story of your past lives that you feel they're past lives or dreams you had when you were a little kids. Normally, we give greatest credence to the oldest source of an historical event because it is closer in time than a scribe further removed from the event. These are the oldest the oldest writings we have, with the possible exception of the geometrical language that predates Egyptian hieroglyphs. The ancient Sumerians were telling us a story of history that's very difficult to accept because our certainty that what we know what we now know about the past is correct. The story is so outrageous on so many levels that scientists are having a very difficult time accepting it, even though they know it must be true. It is the oldest source. If it weren't so outrageous, we would have accepted it as face value long ago because it came from such an ancient source. I'm getting parched. All this reading and smoking. Need some water. On the other hand, if they were crazy making up stories without any real knowledge, how do we explain that they knew so many facts about nature that, from our point of view of history, would have been impossible for them to know? For example, not only did the Dogon know about all the other planets, but so did the Sumerians. From the very beginning of their culture, the oldest known culture in the world, the Sumerians, extending back to around 380,000 BC, knew exactly what it would look like to approach our solar system from outer space. They knew about all the other planets and counted them from outer to inner as though coming in from outside the solar system. Just as the Dogon showed on the cave wall, the Sumerians described the relative size of different planets and described them in detail as if they were actually passing them in space. What they looked like, the water on them, the color of the clouds, the whole experience was described in detail 3,800 years BC. This is fact. How is this possible? Or is the truth of our beginning unknown to us? Or is the truth of our beginning unknown to us? Before NASA sent our space probe into outer space past the outer planet, Stitchin sent them a Sumerian description of all the planets viewed from space, and when the satellite reached them one by one, sure enough, the Sumerian descriptions were exactly right. Another example, they knew of the precession of the equinox from the very beginning of their existence as a culture. They knew that the earth was tilted on its axis at 23 degrees to its orbital plane around the sun, and that it rotated in a circle that took approximately 25,920 years to complete. Now, that's a tough one for a straight historian to understand, especially a scientific type who knows that it takes 2,160 years of continuous observation of the night skies to even know what the earth wobbles. The minimum length of time is 2,160 years, yet the Sumerians knew about it on day one of their civilization. How did they know on day one? They're just, we know it. Because they came with all the tech, or what? They came from a different planet. How did they know it? There's so much extraordinary evidence coming out of these clay tablets that it's not being absorbed into the general thinking very quickly, as I was taught in school and understood it. Moses wrote Genesis around 1250 BC, which is about 3,250 years ago. That's what I've always read. Yet Sumerian tablets exist that were written at least 2,000 years before Moses lived, and they have the same account as the first chapter of the Bible, almost word for word. These tablets even have Adam and Eve and the names of all their sons and daughters, the whole spectrum of events described in Genesis. It was all written down before Moses ever received it. This proves that Moses was not the author of Genesis. Obviously, this truth will be hard to accept by the Christian community, but it is true. I can understand why this knowledge is taking so long to sink into our modern culture, because it's a huge deviation from the accepted history of the earth, and this major truth about Moses is only a tiny part of the whole truth. Tiamat and Nibiru. Even deeper than any of this exceptional and impossible bits of information they knew, and there is much more, is the actual story of the Sumerians wrote is the actual story of the Sumerians wrote about the beginnings of the human race before Adam and Eve. They're talking about a time that goes way, way, way back. The story begins several billion years ago when Earth was very young. It was then a large planet called Tiamat. It rotated around the sun between Mars and Jupiter. Ancient Earth had a large moon, which their records say was destined to become a planet itself someday in the future. According to the records, there was one more planet in our solar system that we are only vaguely aware of it in this modern times. The Babylonians called this planet Marduk, and this name was sort of stuck. This name sort of stuck, but the Sumerians' name for it was Nibiru. It was a huge planet that spun retrograde compared to other planets. The other planets are in more or less flat plane moving in one direction, but Nibiru moves in the other direction, and when it comes close to the other planet, it passes through the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. Figure 3 day, I'll show you right now. They said that it passes through our solar system every 3,600 years, and when it came, it was usually a big event in our solar system. Then it would go away out past the outer planets and disappear from our sight. NASA, by the way, has probably found this planet. At least it is the most probable possibility. They used 2 satellites and located it at an enormous distance from the sun. It's definitely there, but the Sumerians knew about it thousands of years ago. Then, according to the records, as fate would have it, on one orbital pass, Nibiru came in so close that one of its moons struck Tiamat, or Earth, and tore about half of it off. Just ripped this planet right in half. According to the Sumerian records, this big chunk of Tiamat, along with her major moon, got knocked off course, went into orbit between Venus and Mars, and became Earth as we know it. The other chunk broke into a million pieces and became what the Sumerian records call the hammered bracelet, which we call the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. This is another point astronomers have marveled at. How did they know about the asteroid belt? Because you can't see it with the naked eye. This is how far back the Sumerians' records go. The records continue to talk about earlier events until at one point they tell more about Nibiru. It was inhabited by conscious beings called the Nephilim. The Nephilim are very tall. The females are about 10 to 12 feet tall, and males are about 14 to 16 feet. They're not immortal, but their lifetime is about 360,000 years, Earth years, according to the Sumerian records. Then they die. You guys can see. That's where Tiamat. The asteroid belt. Nibiru atmosphere problem. According to the Sumerian records, approximately 430,000 years, perhaps as much as 450,000 years ago, the Nephilim started having a problem with their planet. It was an atmospheric problem, very much like the ozone problem we're having right now, and their scientists decided on a solution similar to what our scientists have considered putting dust particles into the ozone layer to filter out the sun damaging rays. Nibiru's orbit takes it so far away from the sun that they needed to hold in the heat. So they decided to put gold particles into their higher atmosphere, which would reflect that light and temperature back like a mirror. They planned to get large quantities of gold, pulverize it, and suspend it in space above their planet. Yes, it is true. It is true that they talked about subjects that seem contemporary. Contemporary ancient humans talking about ETs and sophisticated science. This is not Star Trek or science fiction. It is real. What they said is pretty amazing, and that's why it's been so slow coming out into the general public's knowledge. Sorry, I feel like I need to take a break, but we're almost done. What do you guys think? It's interesting how, but my reading needs to get better. Stop getting tongue tied. But very interesting, and I'm glad I'm reading this because it's very interesting. The Nephilim had the capabilities of space travel, though they weren't at that time much further advanced than we were right now. It appears the Sumerian records show them in their spaceships with flames coming out the back, rocket ships. This is beginning space travel, not sophisticated. In fact, they were so primitive that they had to wait until Nibiru got near enough to Earth before they could even make the trip between the two planets. They couldn't just take off any old time, but had to wait until they were close. I believe that since the Nephilim weren't able to leave the solar system, they searched through all the planets that were here and found that Earth had large quantities of gold. So they sent a team here over 400,000 years ago for one purpose only, to mine gold. The Nephilim who came to Earth were headed by 12 members who were like bosses, about 600 workers who were to actually dig the gold, and about 300 who stayed in orbit in their mothership. They first went into the area of present-day Iraq and began to establish themselves and build their cities, but that's not where they mined the gold. Figure 3 to 9. For the gold, they went to a specific valley in Southeast Africa. One of the 12, whose name was Enel, was the leader of the miners. They went deep into the earth and dug large quantities of gold. Then every 360 years, when Nibiru Marduk came around, they would shuttle the gold to their home planet. Then they'd continue digging while Nibiru traveled its orbit again. According to the Sumerian records, they dug for a very long time, about 100,000 years to 150,000 years, and then the Nephilim rebellion took place. Settlements. That's Africa right there. Oh yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking like, shoot, they didn't have teleportation, make it faster, the Stargates, or what? They were like still, cause what it says they weren't that advanced like what we are right now, and what China is working on too, the teleportation, the letter quantum teleportation. I think it was quantum, where they're sending messages, quantum messages, and I'm wondering if it's like physical messages, or I think they're just saying like not the conventional like texting how they send stuff, but I think it's going to lead to teleportation of matter and stuff like you know the holographic stuff, all this crazy technologies. I don't quite agree with Stitch's dating on when this happened. He got it not directly through the Sumerian records, but by calculating how long he thought it should be. He came up with the time of about 300,000 years ago when the rebellion took place. I believe it was closer to 200,000 years ago. The Nephilim rebellion and the origin of our race. Somewhere between 300,000 years and 200,000 years ago, the Nephilim workers rebelled. The Sumerian records wrote about this rebellion in great detail. The workers rebelled against their bosses. They did not want to keep digging in the mines. You can't imagine the workers saying, "We've been digging this gold for 150,000 years and we're tired of it. We're not going to do this anymore." I would probably have lasted about 1 month. Yeah, and then they don't even have AI. Like, everyone has AI. Everyone has androids. Where are your guys' androids? You know? I feel like it would be like more of a hassle to create humans than just AI. But it says you weren't that advanced at that time, and there's like thousands of years, so they're way more advanced now, you know. So they're like, we need to come back in a different time travel, cut all those years in half. Here we go. We're not going to do this anymore. I would probably have lasted about 1 month. The rebellion presented a problem for the bosses. So the 12 leaders came together to decide what to do. They decided to take a certain life form that already existed on this planet, which was, as I understand it, one of the primates. Then they would take the blood of the primate, mix it with clay, then take the sperm of one of the young male Nephilim and mix these elements together. The tablet actually shows them with what looks like chemical flasks pouring something from one flask to another to create this new life form. And it's also like to cut. I always keep cutting the homunculus. Um, there's this great channel I follow, Minds Unveiled. They did a great thing about the homunculus and how ancient times and the Greeks and all these were creating life forms and like little people and all these things. I'm gonna leave a link to the video, to one of his videos if I'm gonna remember. I'm gonna put a link and to check it out. It's very interesting. Okay. Their plan was to use the DNA of the primates and their own DNA to create a more advanced race than Earth's had at that time, so that the Nephilim could control this new race for the sole purpose of mining gold. According to the original Sumerian records, we were created to be miners as slaves to mine gold. That was our only purpose, and when they mined all the gold, they needed to save their own planet. Their intention was to destroy our race and leave. They weren't even going to allow us to live. Now, most people hearing that would think, that can't be us. We're too noble for something like that. But that is what the oldest writings, records on Earth state to be true. Remember, Sumerian is the oldest known language in the world, older by far than works such as the Holy Bible and the Quran. It now appears that the Holy Bible was birthed out of the ashes of Sumer. What science has discovered is almost as interesting. In the as exact place where the Sumerian records say we mine gold, archaeologists have found gold mines. These ancient gold mines are dated back as far as 100,000 years. What is really incredible is that Homo sapien, that's us, were mining gold in these mines. Our bones were found there. Those gold mines had been worked at least 100,000 years ago, and they have dated humans in these mines as early as 20,000 years ago. Now, what the heck were we doing mining gold 100,000 years ago? Why did we need gold? It's a soft metal, not something you could use like certain other metals. It wasn't found very often in ancient artifacts. So why were we doing this, and where was it going? Did Eve come from the gold mines? There, then there's sorry. Then there's the so-called Eve theory that people have been trying to put down for a long time. Scientists took a certain component in the DNA molecule and overlapped it to show which one came first. They figured out that the first person of humanity lived somewhere between 150 and 250 years ago, 250,000 years ago, and that the first person whom they called Eve happened to come from the exact valley the Sumerians claimed that we were mining gold. Since then, one scientist has discarded this theory because there are many other ways to look at the DNA origins, but I still find it remarkable that this theory just happened to point at the same valley where the Sumerian records say it all started. Thoth's version of the origin of our race. Now let's see how similar Thoth's version is. He agrees with Melchizdek tradition that our particular race didn't start 350,000 years ago, as Sitchin says, but exactly 200 and 207,000 years ago. From 1993 or 198,214 years ago BC, he said that the original people of our race were placed on an island located off the coast of southern Africa called Gondwanaland. I don't know if this is the right shape of Gondwanaland. It's not important, but it was in that area. They were placed where primarily so that they could be contained and not leave. When they evolved enough to be useful to the Nephilim, they were transported to the mining area in Africa and to various other places where they were used to mine gold and perform other services. So this original race, our ancestors developed and evolved there on the island of Gondwanaland for about 50 to 70,000 years. You can see on this map how the various land masses could have fit together at once, and in this And this is what scientists now suspect is true. They call this one landmass before they divided Gondwana land. They got the name from the creation stories of the tribes in Western Africa. If you read the various creation stories of these tribes, they all have different ideas about how creation took place, but one thread runs through all of them exactly the same. They all say they came from the west, from an island off the western shore of Africa, and that it was called Gondwana. They all agree on that one piece of information, with the one known exception of the Zulus, who claim to have come from space. Came from space. And I think, yeah, Zulu is the tribe member that David Icke interviewed. What was his name? I have it saved on my thing, on my playlist. The interview, and that guy from Zulu, he shows a bunch of like figurines. He already had like I seen that interview. The one I have saved is like a potato, but the one of them I seen was pretty like clear. I need to find that one, but he shows David Icke like probably 50 figurines, like about 8 inches tall, and they're all like different creatures and aliens and robots and dinosaurs and all these different things that they're made out of like silver and gold, I think, and they're passed down from the Zulu tribe. And David Icke was like privileged. They showed him that all these things, and you know how the tribes are. They don't really show you people, but these things need to get out. People need to know, and that's what's going down. That's what's going down in the D. Okay. The Sumerian records actually picture humans as about 1/3 the height of the Nephilim. The Nephilim were definitely giants compared to us. They were 10 to 16 feet tall. If you believe the records, I don't see any reason for them to lie. Thoth said that there were giants on earth, but he didn't say who they were or anything more about them. The Bible says the same thing. Here it is in chapter 6 of Genesis. And it came to pass, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. That's an important statement. When man began to multiply, I'll talk about that in a moment. That the sons of God, think about that one for a moment. It's saying the sons of God, plural, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they, the sons of God, took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. This indicates that the Lord is also flesh. Yet this day shall be 120 years. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Yeah, that one always gets me like, what is he talking about? What are you talking about? like what's going on? Yeah, and just reading all that stuff in the Bible too is like, what? And then it talks like, okay, and I never hear no one really talks about this either. Like, Cain kills Abel. They banish Cain. He gets picked up by the Canaanites, and this is all in Genesis, the Canaanites. But where did the Canaanites come from? And suppose there's only two people in Genesis, and then it even goes on to say about the Egyptians, and then they were already established. They I'm talking about them in Genesis. So there was like more than one tribe or people or androgynous beings or different types of creations on this earth. They were all battling it out for supremacy. I think that was something like that going down. That's crazy. It's like a whole like action, like freaking endless stories. It's like amazing. What do you guys think? You guys believe these stories? The part of the Bible has been interpreted in a lot of ways, but when you see it in the light of what the Sumerian records are saying, it takes on a completely different aspect, especially when you read the older Bible that tells what the giants were called. They were called the Nephilim. In the Christian Bible, exactly the same sounding word as the Sumerian records give. There are over 900 versions of the Bible in the world, and almost all of them talk about giants, a large percentage of them especially calling them the Nephilim. Conceiving the human race. The Syrian role. Thoth says there were giants here on earth. That's all he said. He did not say how they got here or where they came from. He said that when our race was created, these giants became our mother. He said that 7 of them came together, dropped their bodies by consciously dying, and formed a pattern of 7 interlocking spheres of consciousness, exactly like the Genesis pattern, which you'll learn about in chapter 5. This merging created a white-blue flame, which the ancients called the flower of life, and they placed this flame into the womb of the earth. The Egyptians called this womb the halls of Amenti, which in a fourth dimensional space that's located in third dimensionally, about 8,000 miles under the surface of the earth, and is connected to the Great Pyramid through a fourth dimensional passageway. One of the primary uses of the halls of Amenti is for the creation of new races or species. Inside it is a room based on Fibonacci proportions made from what appears to be stone. In the middle of the room sits a cube, and on top of the cube is the flame the Nephilim created. This flame, which is 4 or 5 feet tall and about 3 feet in diameter, has a whitish blue light. This light is pure prana, pure consciousness, which is a planetary ovum created for us to begin this new evolutionary path that we call human. Thoth says that if there's a mother, there's got to be a father somewhere, and the nature of the father's sperm must come from outside the system or body. So when the Nephilim were sitting up their flasks and preparing for this new race to develop, another race of beings from a far distant star from the third planet out from Sirius B were preparing to travel to Earth. There were 32 members of this race, 16 males, 16 females, who were married into a single family. They were also giants of the same height as the Nephilim. Though the Nephilim were primarily third-dimensional beings, the Syrians were primarily fourth-dimensional. 32 people marrying each other probably sounds strange too. On Earth, one male and one female married because we're reflecting the light of our sun. Our sun is a hydro sun, hydrogen sun, which was one, which has one proton and one electron. We duplicate that process of hydrogen, and that's why we marry the way we do, one on one. If you were to visit planets that have helium suns, which have two protons, two electrons, two neutrons, then you would find two males and two females joining together to make children. When you go to an old sun like Sirius B, which is a white dwarf and highly evolved, it has a system of 32 germanium. So the Syrians came here and knew exactly what to do. They entered directly into the womb of the halls of Amenti, right into the pyramid, and before the flame. These beings had the understanding that all things are light. They understood the connection between thought and feeling. So they simply created 32 rose quartz slabs that were about 30 inches high, 3 or 4 inches wide, and roughly 18 to 15 feet long. They created them out of nothing, absolutely nothing at all, around the flame. Then they lay down on these slabs, alternating male and female facing upward, and their heads toward the center around the flame. The Syrians conceived or merged with the flame or ovum of the Nephilim on the third dimensional level. The Nephilim scientists placed the laboratory created human eggs in the wombs of the 7 Nephilim women from which the first human beings was created. The first human being was eventually born. Conception, in human terms, happens in less than 24 hours. The basic process through the first 8 cells, but conception on a planetary level is very different. According to Thoth, they lay there without moving for approximately 2,000 years, conceiving with the earth, this new race. Finally, after 2,000 years, the first human beings were born in Gondwana land off the western shores of southern Africa. And now's arrival. Now that the part of the story where the Sumerians are the father doesn't seem to completely correlate with that the Sumerian records say, at least according to the story given by Zachariah Sitchin, until you look at a sequence of events that Sitchin didn't seem to understand, and now who was the first one to come to Earth and was the boss in southern Africa, did not land on getting kind of heavy. This gravity's pulling me down. Did not land when he arrived on Earth. He landed in the waters. Why did he go into the waters? Because that's where the dolphins and the whales were. The dolphins and the whales were the highest level of consciousness on this planet, and still are, in simple galactic terms, and now had to go into the ocean to get permission to live and mine gold on Earth. Why? Because this planet belonged to the dolphins and whales, and it is a galactic law what permission must be granted before an off-planet race can enter into a different consciousness system. According to the Sumerian records, Enlil stayed with them a very long time, and when he finally decided to come onto land, he was half human and half fish. At one point, Enlil became all human. This was described in the Sumerian records. You see, the third planet out from Sirius B that some call Oshina happens to be the home planet of the dolphins and whales. Peter Stephenson Shinstone, leader of the dolphin movement in Australia, has channeled an unusual book, The Legend of the Golden Dolphin, which came from the dolphin and describes exactly how they came from another galaxy, how they came to be on the little star around Sirius B, and how they traveled to Earth. The entire planet there is almost completely water. There's an island about the same of Australia and another about the size of California. And that's all. On those two land masses, there are human type beings, but not very many. The rest of the planet, which is all water, is Cetacine. There's a direct connection between the human type beings and the Cetaceans. So when the Enlil and Nephilim came here, he first connected with the dolphins, Syrians, to receive their blessings. Then he went onto the land and began the process that led to the creation of our race. Yeah, that story, this is where you get like the Lanteans, the half people, the fish people, and in Greek mythology too, there was this like tribe of like sea people that used the dolphins to ride on. They would go to war with the dolphins were like their horses basically, and they would ride them. And there's even like frescoes, I think that's what they call them, of like the dolphins like all like suited up, and then the men riding them. Very interesting because dolphins, very smart. That's why too, and they know all this stuff. So, and like it reminds me of this dream. I think I shared it on my channel too. This dream I had about something like that, similar, where these infinity ring. It would look like an infinity ring, and it was like a crystal, like a light, and it came to Earth. And I'll just keep it short. It like spun, but there's a lot of details in this dream. But basically, the rings broke apart, the infinity rings, and they broke, and then they went to different parts of the ocean, of the world, and landed in the ocean. And then these little creatures came out of them, and they basically looked like they're little creatures at first, but they moved real fast, and they became like half man, half fish, and they came out the water. And then I woke up. But I'll go more into detail about that dream some other time. I think I already did in my channel or something. But if you want to hear about that dream, let me know. But yeah, this chapter's almost done. Slytherin. This is a long chapter. I got how many more pages? Okay, 2 more. Dang it, 3 more. 3 more pages. Okay, we're gonna finish this. Okay. Nephilim mothers. To recapitulate and clarify, after the rebellion, when it was decided to create a new race here on Earth, it was the Nephilim who became the mother aspect. The Sumerian records say 7 females stepped forward. Then the Nephilim took clay from the earth, blood from the primate, and sperm from the young Nephilim male, mixed this together and put it into the wombs of the young female Nephilim who were chosen for this. They gave birth to human babies. So 7 of us were birthed at once, not just one Adam and Eve, according to the original stories. And we were sterile. We could not reproduce. The Nephilim continued procreating little humans, making an army of little babies, little beings, us, putting them on the island of Gondwana land. If you want to believe this story, which is part Sumerian record and part Thoth, our race mother is Nephilim and our father is Syrian. Now, if it were not for the Sumerian records concerning the Nephilim, this would all seem absolutely outrageous, and it still does. But there's a tremendous amount of scientific evidence that this is true if you need the archaeological records, not about the Syrian father, but definitely about the Nephilim mother. Science doesn't understand how we got here. You are aware that there's a missing link between the last primate and us. We seem to come out of nowhere. They do not know that we're somewhere between 150 and 250,000 years old, but they have no idea where we came from or how we developed. We just stepped through some mystical doorway and arrived. Yeah, well, I think that too, because I think the Emerald Tablets or the one of these things that I listen to, they talk about that, how things just come out of like the ether, like life forms just come out. Oh, and it's just said it right here too. It's like they come out when it's their time, and all these crazy life forms are coming out of like the quantinium realms. Adam and Eve. Another interesting part of the Sumerian records was that after they mined gold for a while in Africa, the cities in the north near modern-day Iraq became quite elaborate and extremely beautiful. They were in rainforests and had huge gardens around them. It was finally decided, according to the Sumerian records, to bring some of the slaves from the southern mines to the cities to have them work the gardens. Evidently, we made great slaves. One day, a now younger brother, Enki, whose name means snake, went to Eve, and the records used that name, Eve, and told her that the reason his brother didn't want the humans to eat of the tree in the certain center of the garden was because it would make them like the Nephilim. Enki was trying to get even with his brother for a dispute they were having. The whole story is much more involved than this. But you can't read it in the records. So Enki convinced Eve to eat the apple tree, the tree of knowledge of the good and evil, which according to the records included more than just a dualistic point of view. It gave her the power of procreate, to give birth. So Eve found Adam, and they ate of this tree and had children, each of which was listed by name of the Sumerian tablets. Now think about the Adam and Eve story from here on. Both stories, the one in Sumerian records and the one in the Bible. God walks through the garden. He's in a body, in flesh. which was suggested in Genesis. He's walking through the garden calling for Adam and Eve. He doesn't know where they are. He is God, but he doesn't know where Adam and Eve are. He calls for them and they come. He doesn't know that they ate of the tree until he sees them trying to hide themselves because they're ashamed. Then he realizes what they've done. Here's another thing. The word for God, Elohim, in the original Bible, in fact, in all the Bibles, was not singular but plural. Was the God who created humanity a race of beings? When Enel found out that Adam and Eve had done this, he was furious. He especially didn't want them to eat of the other tree, the tree of life, because then not only would they be able to procreate, but they would become immortal. We don't know if these are really trees or not. It might have been symbolic or something bound to consciousness. Therefore, at that point, it now removed Adam and Eve from his garden. He put them somewhere else and monitored them. He had to have monitored them because he wrote down the names of all the sons and daughters. He knew everything that was going on in the whole family. It was all written down over 2,000 years before the Bible was ever written. From that time of Adam and Eve, our race developed into strains. That's his brother. That's Inky. Inky Stinky. Strains. One that could produce and were free though monitored, and the other that could not have children and were slaves. According to the modern scientists, this later strain continued to mine gold until at least 20,000 years ago. The bones of this second strain that were found in the mines were identical to ours. The only difference is that they couldn't have children. This strain was completely destroyed at the time of the Great Flood, roughly 12,500 years ago. There is much more to this subject, which we will give you at the right moment. We will be talking about 4 Earth pole shifts in this work. When Gondwana land sank, when Lemuria sank, when Atlantis sank, which is the Great Flood, and the one that is now about to happen. This side note is important to understand. According to the degree of tilt of the Earth axis and the degree of the pole shift, which happens on a pretty regular basis, according to science, have a direct relationship to the change in consciousness on the planet. For example, the last time the pole shifted at the time of the Great Flood, the North Pole was in Hawaii. I realize this is debatable. At least that's where the magnetic pole was, and now it's particularly 90 degrees from there. That's a big change. It was not a positive change, but a negative one. We went down in consciousness, not up. The rising of Lemuria. According to Thoth, after Adam and Eve, there was a major shift of axes which submerged Gondwana land. Thoth says that when Gondwana land went down, another landmass came up in the Pacific Ocean, which we call Lemuria, and descendants of Adam and Eve were taken from their homeland and brought to Lemuria. Figure 3 to 12 is not exactly what Lemuria looked like, but it's close in a certain way. It extended from Hawaii Islands all the way down to Easter Islands. It was not a solid mass, but a series of thousands of islands that were closely linked. Some of them were big, some of them little, and there were a whole lot more than this picture shows. It was like a continent that was barely above water, a water continent. Adam's race was brought there and allowed to develop on its own without the Nephilim interfering. As far as I know, we remain on Lemuria for 65 to 70,000 years. While we were on Lemuria, we were very happy. We had a few problems. We were accelerating through our evolutionary path and moving very well. We did lots of experiments on ourselves and implemented many physical changes to our bodies. We were changing our skeleton structure, working on the base of our spine, a great deal working on our skull size and shape. We were mostly right brained, feminine in nature, and evolutionary cycle has to choose whether it's going to be male or female, just like you did when you came to Earth. You've got to make that decision. So our race was becoming female. By the time Lemuria sank as a race, we were equivalent to about a 12-year-old girl. Okay, this is like the last one, I think, the page. Exploration of Lemuria in 1910. The fact that Lemuria probably existed was established in our society as far back as 1910. Excuse me. And you know, it talks about it a lot too. Is Stanley P. Hall. Great guy to listen to. We don't remember much about this knowledge because in 1912 something happened to change our course of evolution. In 1912, experiments took place that were similar to the Philadelphia experiment of 1942 and 1943, which we'll talk about later. They actually did the experiment in 1913, but it turned out to be a huge catastrophe. And I personally believe that this experiment is what caused World War One and in 1914. After that, we're never the same. We were never the same. Excuse me. It's getting, I'm bad at reading, but my eyes are drying up. My mouth is drying up. My eyes. Here we go. Before World War One, the spiritual growth pattern of the United States was similar to what's happening right now. People were extremely interested in spiritual and psychic work, in meditation and understanding the ancient past and everything else of that nature. People like Colonel James Churchward and Augustus Lee Plongeon from France were studying Atlantis and Lemuria, and there were many similar thought patterns compared to the present. Then, when the World War One came along, we fell asleep and didn't start waking up again until the 1960s. But the proof they had in 1910 about the existence of Lemuria was pretty remarkable. It had to do with coral. Coral can grow underneath the surface of water only to a depth of 150 feet. In 1910, I suspect the Pacific floor was higher than it is now because they were able to see coral rings on the surface of the ocean floor heading away from the Easter Island for a great distance. By the way, the ocean floor does rise and fall. You might not know it, but the Atlantic Ocean floor rose over 2 miles in December 1969. You can look it up. You can look this up in the January 1970 issue of Life magazine. In the Bermuda area, many islands suddenly began to break. the surface. Some are still there, but most of them sank again. The ocean floor had been over 2 miles deep prior to that time. At the time, at the time that Plato described Atlantis and Atlantic Ocean, the Greeks were having difficult time navigating their ships into the Atlantic Ocean outside the Straits of Gibraltar because the water in that area was only 10 to 15 feet deep. 10 or 15 feet deep, sometimes even less. Now the water is deep again. The coral rings they discovered in the Pacific were estimated at 1,800 feet deep. This meant that the rings originally had islands inside because the coral had to be close to the surface in order to grow. If the rings were 180 feet deep, it meant that since coral cannot grow below 150, the rings sank very, very slowly. In 1910, people could see these rings going off into the distance, so they knew there had to be a lot of islands there at one time. Probably more important, if you follow the fauna and flora from the Hawaiian Islands, you'll find the same features, all a whole series of islands moving along the arc from Hawaii all the way to Easter Island. These islands are separated by long distance, but if you look on a map, you'll see a long string. That string used to run along the western shores of Lemuria. All those islands, including Tahiti and Borea, were part of Lemuria. All these lands in this string have exactly the same fauna and flora, not on any of the other islands, just this one. String the same trees. Sorry, excuse me, I'm like reading like a robot. The other islands, just this one string, the same trees, same birds, same bees, same bugs, same bacteria, same everything. Science can explain these phenomena only if there were at one time much closer than bridges between these islands. In Aeantia and the beginning of Tantra, this new civilization in Lemuria was developing quite well. Everything was going along just great, but most of Lemurian eventually sank. About 8,000 years before it sank, two people were there whose names were E and Tia. This couple did something that no one else had ever done before, at least in our evolutionary cycle. They discovered that if you make love in a certain way and breathe in a certain way, you'll get different results when you have a child. Though the conception of that different kind of birth, all three of them, the mother, the father, and the child, would become immortal. In other words, by having a baby in a certain way, the experience changes you forever. A and Tia suspected that they had become immortal, I'm sure, because of their experience. As time went on and everybody else started dying, but they remained alive, people began to realize that they really did have something. So they finally set up a school. As far as I know, it was the first mystery school on the earth in this cycle. It was called the Nakal, or Nakal, rhymes with Makal Mystery School, where they simply tried to teach how to do this thing we call resurrection or ascension through Tantra. Tantra is a Hindu word for yoga or union with God, though sexual practices we have a lot to go over before we can understand exactly what they were doing. Anyway, they did this, and then they began to teach other people. Before Lemuria sank, they had instructed approximately 8,000 people, which means that about 333 families of three each were able to understand what they were doing and demonstrate it. They were able to make love in this unusual way. They didn't touch each other. Actually, in fact, they didn't even need to be in the same room. It was interdimensional love making. They taught others how to do it, and it was getting to a place where in other few thousand it was getting to a place where in another few thousand years they would probably have translated the whole race into a new consciousness. But God evidently said no, it was not the right time. Ten they just gotten started when the Lemurian sank. Lemuria, like I said, was female, and the Lemurians were very psychic. They knew that Lemuria was going to sink a long time beforehand. They knew with absolute certainty. It wasn't even a matter of discussion. So they prepared a long time in advance. They took all their artifacts to Lake Titicaca, Mount Shasta, and other places. When the great golden disc of Lemuria was removed, they got everything of value out of the country and prepared for the end. When Lemuria finally sank, they were totally off the island. They had resettled from the Lake Titicaca through Central America and Mexico to as far north as Mount Shasta. Yeah, and they say a lot of crazy stuff happens in Mount Shasta. Yeah, there's like this whole alien. Yeah. Yes, the I Am discourses of Godfrey Ray. The guy, he wrote the discourses in 1930. Like, he was living at the bottom, the base of Mount Shasta, and the ascended master Saint Germain approached him, and he was telling him how they lived past lives and all these stuff, resurrection. Brian Scott covered that, and it's very interesting. And that I feel like listening to it right now. I'll probably listen to it when I go to sleep, but that's very interesting too. I'll put that up there too. According to what Dolph says, the sinking of Lemuria and the rising of the Atlantis occurred at the same time. During another shift of the axes, Lemuria went down, and what would be called Atlantis rose. Atlantis was a pretty large continent, as shown here. The southern eastern part of the United States wasn't there. Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and parts of Texas were underwater. I don't know if Atlantis was quite this big or not, but it was pretty big. It actually consisted of this continent plus 9 islands, one to the north, one to the east, one to the south, and 6 to the west, which extended to where the Florida Keys are now. If you read the Emerald, if you hear the Emerald Tablets or read them, I have it in my playlist also. But it talks about how there's all the islands, and once it sank, Atlantis sank, all the knowledge and the people went to the different islands, and they all taught the people. They were mostly living like savages, and they taught them all these things. And they said in the future, when all the knowledge accumulates back up, which I think is happening now, that all these things were going to come to light, and everyone's going to know the truth, I guess. Update: on May 23rd, 1998, Aaron Duval, president of the Egyptology Society in Miami, Florida, announced that ancient Atlantis has been found near Bimini, and that it can be significantly proven beyond any doubt. They have found a huge underwater pyramid and have opened hermetically sealed chambers to expose records that confirm what Plato said about Atlantis during the time of ancient Greece. Mr. Duval said they will present their evidence to the world before the end of 1998 or soon afterwards. I don't think I ever. Where they at? I know they said that Bimini, they found the road, but I never heard they found a pyramid. They said they found a road, but where's the pyramid? I haven't heard nothing about that, huh? Okay. Dr. Duval. So he's well, at that time for Egyptology Society in Miami. So we gotta see if those pyramids came up. That's weird because I know the Bimini Road, but I never heard that they found pyramids. Or I know there's like an image that is underwater and there's a bunch of pyramids. Is that what they're talking about? Is that Bimini Road? Is that Bimini Road? Because you always show up, they're like, oh, they found pyramids underwater, but I don't really know if that's Bimini. Maybe it is. But that concludes chapter 3, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. So, we're making headway. A lot of, still got a lot more to read. So I'm gonna finish this book soon. We're gonna get the volume 2 and then 3, which I never read 3. I'm pretty sure there's 3. And 2, I got almost finished it, but I never did. But I got way into it. I probably was only like 2 chapters from finishing it. But that concludes that. Thank you guys for whoever's watching. I know it's 2 hours long, but if you guys like long content, short content, so what do you guys think? Leave your comments, your ideas, whatever you guys are thinking. You guys want to you know hear more of these things, and we can all hear it together and read it together and learn together. Revisiting this is like just reawakening all these memories and these ideas, and just so many things that, like the reincarnation, and like I'm working on this short to my book, The Jack Workman, and it's called Briders. But that's like kind of about what we're reading right now, about reincarnation, battling evil, all kinds of. So I kind of wrote a little bit, but I need to write some more. And, I'm just thinking in my head. But thank you guys. Namaste. Thank you, Duncan. Spasiba, gracias, arigato. Shay, thank you. And remember your ancient past.